Why was she always the one they looked past? The briefing room was filled with sharp uniforms, polished boots, and the weight of decisions that could send men into the line of fire. But when Staff Sergeant Riley Blackwood spoke, it was as if her words dissolved into thin air before reaching anyone who mattered. Lieutenant Commander Hayes didn't even try to hide his disdain this time. He leaned back in his chair, hands folded, eyes heavy with the confidence of a man who thought rank made him immune to mistakes. "Sniper overwatch isn't your lane, Sergeant," he said flatly. "Leave the battlefield to those who understand it. Intelligence analysts stay behind screens. That's where they belong." Riley swallowed hard, jaw tight, but said nothing. The taste of silence was bitter. Her report lay on the table between them, pages of intercepted communications, terrain analysis, and predictive threat assessments. Data she had spent days piecing together. She knew what those patterns meant. Enemy sniper teams were waiting. The evidence was clear, but Hayes pushed her report aside like it was a minor inconvenience, a nuisance standing in the way of his neat, uncomplicated plan. Sometimes the deadliest silence wasn't on the battlefield. It was in a room full of men who didn't want to hear the truth. Riley lowered her eyes, hiding the storm building in them. She'd been here before, too many times. Too many warnings ignored because they didn't fit the convenient narrative of minimal resistance. Too many gut-deep instincts brushed off because she didn't wear a SEAL trident on her chest. She was 29, with 6 years of experience in military intelligence and a lifetime of precision shooting behind her. But in that room, her voice carried less weight than the polished insignia on Hayes's collar. Still, she couldn't stop thinking about the team already en route. 12 men walking into a valley where unseen rifles were waiting. 12 lives balanced against the arrogance of a man who thought caution was weakness. She looked up briefly. Senior Chief Martinez, leader of SEAL Team 4, was watching her. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, not quite belief, but not dismissal either. He knew she believed in what she was saying. He just couldn't break the chain of command. Not here. Not now. So Riley said nothing more. And that silence haunted her. Later, alone at her desk in the Joint Task Force Operations Center, the reports were still spread in front of her. Redacted transcripts, coordinates, signal intercepts from encrypted radios the enemy thought were safe. She had pieced it all together like a jigsaw puzzle no one else wanted to solve. And now the SEALs were 12 hours into their mission, cut off in hostile mountains with intelligence that had been watered down until it was barely half-truth. Her fingers traced one of the communication strings she had highlighted earlier. Repetition in code words, cross-pattern timing. It was the mark of trained shooters, not irregular militia, not farmers with rifles, professionals, foreign-trained, disciplined, patient. The kind of enemies who knew how to shape the battlefield before the first shot was fired. Her headset crackled faintly with distant radio traffic. The SEAL's encrypted frequency was alive with clipped, coded exchanges. At first routine, then heavier, voices sharper, static bleeding around their edges like fear pressing through professionalism. She leaned in, listening. Contact. It was the word she had dreaded. And then more. Urgent calls for cover fire, broken fragments of location updates, the unmistakable tone of men who had trained for chaos but were now staring into something worse, precision fire from unseen rifles pinning them in place. Riley's stomach knotted. She had known, she had said, she had begged them to listen. Now it was happening exactly as she had predicted. She closed her eyes for a second, hearing the echoes of her father's voice, calm and steady from years ago on the West Texas ranch where he had taught her everything she knew about rifles. The shot you don't take will haunt you more than the one you miss. If you see danger, if you know it's there, you act, because hesitation kills. Not always you, sometimes someone else. Her hand drifted to the locker beside her desk. Inside, her modified M24 rifle waited. Regulation issued, yes, but upgraded competition optics, precision-tuned, every adjustment dialed into muscle memory. She had permission to use it for training, for range days, for qualifications, but never for this, not the way she was thinking. Her father's words pulsed in her chest like a heartbeat. The SEALs' calls for extraction were again and again. Hayes's voice came over command comms, detached, procedural. They would wait for daylight, he said. Safer for the birds. Less risk to equipment. The words cut into Riley like a blade. Equipment, logistics, paper priorities. And what about the men pinned in a kill zone? What about the ones already bleeding? She pulled open the locker, hands steady in a way that surprised her. The rifle gleamed in the low light, familiar, almost alive in her grasp. She checked the scope, the bolt, the chamber. She wasn't supposed to. She knew that. But rules felt hollow when lives were being measured out in minutes. Her clearance gave her options most analysts didn't have. She could check out a vehicle under the guise of reconnaissance. She could log it clean. Nobody would question it. Intelligence analysts often terrain models in the field. She could leave, position herself, and no one would know until later. But the real question wasn't logistics. It was whether she could cross the line she had spent her entire career respecting. Whether she could step from the world of data and prediction into the raw, bloody immediacy of combat. Her hand trembled for the first time, not from fear of the battlefield, from fear of what would come after, the disciplinary hearings, the demotion, the career she had fought for shattered by one choice. But in the back of her mind she saw the faces of men she had briefed that morning, some smiling politely, some barely acknowledging her. Soldiers, yes, but also fathers, sons, brothers, human beings. And she had known then what they didn't, that they were walking into the teeth of something they couldn't see. Could she really sit here, safe behind screens and paperwork, and listen to their voices fade into silence? She thought of her father again, the long hours lying prone in the dust of their ranch fields, watching wind patterns in tall grass, waiting for coyotes to appear. The patience, the discipline, the unshakable belief that a rifle was never just steel and wood, it was responsibility, a covenant. Riley stood. Her decision was already made. The desert night was sharp and clear when she slipped into the vehicle and drove. 8 kilometers of rough terrain lay between her and the high ridge she had marked earlier. The sky stretched wide, stars bright, no clouds, the kind of clarity snipers prayed for. Her headlights were blacked out. The only sounds were the tires grinding against dirt and the low hum of the engine. Every mile carried her further from safety, further from rules, and deeper into the moral battlefield where duty wasn't about what the manual said, it was about what the moment demanded. When she reached the ridge, she killed the engine and sat for a moment listening. The silence was thick, alive. Far in the valley, faint pops of gunfire cracked against the stillness. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. Somewhere out there, men were waiting for help that wasn't coming, unless it came from her. She stepped out, pulled her rifle from the case, and moved low across the ground. Her boots pressed into dust, her breath even, practiced. Every movement from years of training on the ranch came back as if her father were walking beside her. At the crest of the ridge, she went prone and set the bipod. She lifted her scope, adjusted the dials, and scanned. The valley opened below her like a dark ocean, and then movement. She saw them. 2 sniper nests, exactly where she had predicted. Their fields of fire overlapped perfectly, covering the landing zone like a net of invisible death. Helicopters couldn't approach. The SEALs couldn't move. Her heart pounded once hard, then steadied. She reached for the encrypted comms unit clipped to her vest. Her clearance gave her access, though she wasn't supposed to use it this way. She tuned into the SEALs channel and spoke quietly, firmly. "Senior Chief Martinez, this is Blackwood. I have eyes on 2 sniper positions. Coordinates incoming." There was a long pause, then a familiar voice, rough but steady. "Blackwood, is that you?" "Yes, and you don't have time to argue. Confirming first nest at grid 271. Second at grid 268. I can neutralize, but I need your team moving as soon as I fire. Copy." Silence again, and then, "Copy." Her finger found the trigger. The first shot would change everything, not just for the men in the valley, but for her entire life. She exhaled slowly the way her father had taught her. Breath, trigger, break. The crosshair settled, the valley waited. And Riley Blackwood pulled the trigger. That was the moment everything began to unravel. The sound of her shot echoed into the night, a single thread of defiance weaving itself into history. But even as the first enemy position went silent, Riley knew this wasn't just about saving the SEALs. This was about her own battle, against doubt, against silence, against a system that had told her she wasn't meant to be here. And as the valley shifted beneath the weight of her choice, she realized something she had never allowed herself to believe. She was exactly where she belonged. What happens after you break the silence? The valley had swallowed her first shot like the earth itself had been waiting for it. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. No answer, no return fire, just the echo rolling back across the ridges. And then, as if the darkness itself had flinched, the enemy nest went still. No muzzle flash, no silhouette shifting in the broken window. Silent. Finished. Riley didn't move. Her cheek pressed against the stock, eyes fixed through glass, breathing slow and measured. She didn't celebrate. She didn't allow relief. One shot was never the end. It was only the beginning. Through her scope, she saw SEAL Team 4 begin to edge forward, careful, disciplined. Martinez was moving them out of the choke point, using the brief moment she had carved open. Her comms crackled in her ear, his voice low, urgent, but alive with a thread of hope. "Confirmed, one nest down, moving now." She adjusted her scope to the second position. Almost a full kilometer away, perched high against a jagged outcropping, the enemy sniper was waiting. Patient, professional. Riley could see the faintest outline of a barrel tucked into the shadows. He hadn't fired yet. He was waiting for the SEALs to commit, to expose themselves. Her finger rested against the trigger guard, but she didn't pull. Not yet. Timing mattered more than speed. Her father had drilled that into her when she was barely 12, lying prone in the dirt of the ranch fields. The right shot isn't always the fastest. It's the one that changes what happens next. She whispered the words under her breath, a ritual, a steadying force. Below, the SEALs moved in tight formation, weaving through rubble and low stone walls. Even from this distance, she could sense their tension. They didn't know her well. To them, she was the quiet intel analyst back at base, the one who delivered long reports in dim rooms. Now her unseen hand was shaping their survival. The thought almost unnerved her, almost. But then the second sniper shifted, just a fraction, enough for her to catch the glint of a scope in starlight. Her pulse slowed, not quickened. She dialed her elevation, adjusted for the wind that whispered across the ridge. 950 meters, a shot she had made dozens of times in competition. Never like this, never with 12 lives balanced on her accuracy. She exhaled, finger tightened. The second shot cracked through the valley. The figure in the shadows recoiled, then stilled. The scope glint vanished. Silence returned. And then everything moved at once. Martinez's voice came sharp, both threats neutralized, moving to extraction zone now. Blackwood, keep eyes up. Copy, Riley whispered, though her voice trembled now just for a moment, because the reality of what she had just done finally pressed against her ribs. 2 men dead by her hand, not paper threats, not simulated silhouettes on a range. Real, flesh and bone. Her father's lessons had never prepared her for that weight. She pushed the thought down, burying it deep. There would be time for reflection later, maybe, if she allowed herself to feel it, but now the mission was still alive, and so were the SEALs because of her. She swept the valley again through her scope, searching for movement, listening to Martinez's clipped updates as his team pushed toward the extraction zone. Gunfire still cracked in the distance, sporadic, unfocused. The militia fighters were disorganized now, their advantage ripped away when their hidden marksmen had fallen. But Riley knew better than to assume the danger was gone. Professional snipers didn't travel in pairs without redundancy. There could be more. There almost always were. Her eye caught movement again, this time farther east, almost beyond her range. A flash, not muzzle fire but the glimmer of glass. Another scope, or just moonlight catching shattered windows. She adjusted, strained, but couldn't confirm. The angle was bad. The terrain obscured half the ridge. She clenched her teeth. If there was a third sniper, he was positioned perfectly to guard the final stretch to the landing zone. Her comms crackled. "Blackwood, this is Martinez. We've got 800 meters to LZ. Can you confirm it's clear?" She hesitated. Her finger hovered over the transmit. Say it's clear and they'd walk into it blind. Say it's not, and she risked sending them into panic without proof. Her father's words again. "Doubt is the bullet you fire into yourself." She keyed the mic. "Negative, possible third sniper East Ridge, can't confirm angle." There was silence on the line. Then Martinez, "Copy, advise." She closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. She wasn't a commander, she wasn't even supposed to be here, but they were asking her, depending on her. She opened her eyes, her voice steady. "Recommend smoke cover and staggered advance. Stay low, I'll hold overwatch." "Understood." Her scope swept the ridge again, hunting shadows. Nothing, just broken stone, jagged ridges, pale brush. But she knew the feeling too well. The stillness that wasn't natural. The silence that meant someone was waiting. The SEALs deployed smoke grenades. White plumes billowed upward, curling through moonlight. They moved in staggered runs, one element covering while the other advanced. Professional, disciplined, but vulnerable. Riley's heart pounded against her ribs. Every second stretched, her eyes burning against the glass, searching for the shot she might only get once. And then she saw it. The faintest flicker of movement, the shift of a barrel aligning through haze. The scope flash again, brief, unmistakable. She didn't think, she didn't breathe. She fired. The shot rang across the valley, echoing off stone. And this time, there was an answer. Muzzle flashes erupted from the east ridge. More than one, three, maybe four. A coordinated nest concealed until now. "Contact!" Martinez's voice roared through her headset. The SEALs dove for cover as rounds snapped through smoke. Riley cursed under her breath. She had been right, but not enough. Not two, not three, a whole team. She adjusted, chambered, fired again. One flash went silent, then another. But return fire bit back instantly, rounds chewing into the ridge around her. Dust kicked up in her face. She ducked, pressed low, heart hammering. She wasn't invisible anymore. They had her. Her mind raced. She was one rifle against many, exposed on high ground. Every second she stayed meant another chance they'd pin her down. But if she, the SEALs would be blind again, walking into a wall of precision fire. Her breath came fast now, ragged. For the first time that night, fear clawed at her throat. She could die here, not in theory, not in abstraction. She could die here alone, without anyone even knowing why she had left the safety of the base. Her father's voice came again, softer now, almost a whisper. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, Riley. It's the decision to act while your hands are still shaking." Her hands were shaking now, but they stayed on the rifle. She chambered again, forced her breath steady, and rose back into position. Through the smoke and fire she found another muzzle flash. She squeezed. Silence. Again adjust, fire, silence. Two left, maybe three. Martinez's voice cut in, ragged but alive. "Blackwood, keep them busy. We're moving." "Copy," she whispered. Her world shrank to crosshairs and breath, to the rhythm of bolt, chamber, fire, repeat. She stopped counting shots, stopped thinking about consequences. There was only the valley, the ridges, the men moving below, and the choice she had already made. And when at last the firing from the east ridge fell silent, when the smoke began to thin and the SEALs broke into the clearing of the landing zone, Riley sagged against her rifle. Her chest heaved. Sweat stung her eyes. Her arms trembled with exhaustion. But she stayed prone, eyes fixed on the valley, until the roar of helicopter blades filled the air. The extraction bird descended, dust whipping into clouds as the SEALs sprinted toward safety. Martinez's voice came through one last time, low but certain. "You saved us tonight." Riley closed her eyes, her throat tightened. But she said nothing, because she knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of a storm she couldn't control. What do you feel when the storm quiets, but you know the lightning hasn't struck yet? The roar of helicopter blades still vibrated in Riley's chest long after the dust settled over the valley. She lay prone on the ridge, scope still trained on the dark terrain below, even as the SEALs vanished into the night sky. Every instinct told her not to move yet, not to breathe too loudly. Because silence after violence never meant safety. She counted to 60, then another 60. No return fire, no shifting shadows, just the desert, vast and indifferent, stretching under starlight. Only then did she ease back, collapsing against the earth, her rifle still warm against her cheek. For the first time that night, her hands shook uncontrollably, not from recoil, from everything pressing in at once, the enormity of what she had done. She had broken protocol, abandoned her post, lied on official logs, used her clearance to mask movement, engaged in combat as an unauthorized intelligence analyst. By the book, she had just ended her career, maybe even signed her name onto the first page of a court-martial. And yet, she thought of Martinez's voice, "You saved us tonight." Those words clung to her like an anchor in a storm. Riley packed her rifle with slow precision, forcing her hand steady. Every latch, every strap done in silence. The desert had a way of amplifying the smallest sound, and she wasn't ready to risk the possibility of unseen eyes still watching. She slid into the vehicle, headlights still blacked out, and started the long drive back toward the operations center. Each mile carried her closer not just to safety, but to the reckoning she couldn't avoid. Her chest tightened at the thought of Hayes's face. Smug certainty turned sour when he discovered what she had done. Would he see it as defiance, treason, or worse, would he twist it, bury the truth of her actions to protect his own failure? The thought burned in her throat. She tightened her grip on the wheel. Her father's voice whispered again, uninvited but steady. "Doing the right thing isn't the same as being thanked for it." The words felt heavier now than they ever had on that ranch years ago. The operations center was quieter than usual when she returned. Half-lit screens glowed in blue and green, casting shadows across rows of empty chairs. The watch team had rotated. Only 2 analysts sat at their stations, heads bowed over monitors, unaware of where she had been. Riley swiped her badge, logged her return as field reconnaissance, and forced her breathing to sound calm. Routine, nothing unusual. But her uniform carried dust. Her boots carried grit. And her eyes carried something she couldn't hide, the hollow weight of someone who had crossed a line. She sat at her desk, headset back on, pretending to monitor radio chatter. But the frequencies were quiet now, save for the distant chatter of aircraft already well out of danger. And in that quiet, the questions began to claw at her. Had she done it to save them, or had she done it to prove herself? Her father would have said the answer didn't matter. That saving lives was enough. But Riley couldn't silence the other voice in her head, the one that whispered she had fired not just to protect, but to be seen. To finally prove that her place wasn't behind a desk, ignored and dismissed. And that truth terrified her. The following morning, the operations center buzzed with energy. News of the SEALs' extraction had spread quickly. though the official reports were vague. Enemy resistance heavier than expected. Mission compromised, but team extracted successfully. There was no mention of how, no mention of who. But word travels differently in the halls of special operations. By noon, Riley caught Martinez's eyes across the room. He had come in for debrief, his presence filling the space with quiet gravity. He didn't approach her. He didn't need to. His gaze said enough. Respect, gratitude, and something else, an unspoken promise. But if Martinez saw her, so did Hayes. Lieutenant Commander Hayes entered minutes later, crisp uniform, jaw tight. He scanned the room, expression unreadable, then launched into his debrief with the other officers. Riley listened from her desk, each word a knife twisting deeper. Mission complications resulted from unforeseen resistance. Intelligence assessments did not indicate multiple sniper teams in the area. This will be reviewed. Her nails dug into her palm under the desk. Did not indicate. She had indicated. She had shouted. She had risked everything to make them hear. And now he was rewriting it, erasing her warnings as if they had never existed. She wanted to stand, to shout, to expose him in front of everyone, but her throat locked. If she spoke now, she would have to reveal what she had done. And if she revealed it, the storm would come crashing down before she had a chance to prepare. So she stayed silent. That night sleep didn't come. She lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of generators outside the compound, the distant echo of aircraft cycling through missions. Every sound felt too loud, every shadow too sharp. Her mind replayed the shots again and again. The recoil, the silence after each hit, the brief flashes of enemy scopes dying into stillness, and always the faces of the SEALs moving below, unaware that their lives were balanced on the finger of someone they had barely noticed that morning. She turned on her side, clutching the pillow tight. For the first time, the cost pressed into her chest. She had ended lives. Professional soldiers, trained like her, men who believed they were fighting for something. She had taken that from them in the darkness without warning. Her father's voice returned, steady but grave. Never forget, Riley. The rifle isn't just a tool, it's a promise. Every time you use it, you decide who goes home and who doesn't. That decision will live with you longer than the shot itself. She pressed her face into the pillow, muffling a sob she hadn't realized was breaking free. Yes, she had saved the SEALs, but she had also crossed into a place she could never return from. 2 days later, the storm arrived. She was called into the operations commander's office. Hayes sat stiff-backed at the table, papers neatly stacked before him. A panel of officers flanked him, their faces expressionless. Riley stood at attention, jaw tight, heart pounding. The senior officer spoke first. Staff Sergeant Blackwood, we've reviewed vehicle logs and encrypted communication records. There are inconsistencies. Would you like to explain why a vehicle assigned to your clearance was logged out at 2200 hours the night of the SEAL extraction? Her throat went dry. Every path of denial, every attempt at evasion collapsed under the weight of their stares. They already knew. She inhaled slowly, forcing her voice steady. Yes, sir, I left the compound. Hayes leaned forward, his eyes sharp, waiting. The officer continued. And during this unauthorized excursion, did you engage enemy forces? Riley hesitated only a moment, then she lifted her chin. Yes, sir, I did. The room fell silent. Hayes's expression flickered triumph, relief. He had her now, proof that she had broken rules, shattered protocol. But then Martinez's voice cut through the silence, calm, firm. She saved my team. Every head turned. Martinez had stepped into the room without announcement, his presence commanding instant attention. He set a written report on the table. Without her, we wouldn't be here. Every man on my team owes his life to Sergeant Blackwood's actions that night. I stand by that. The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. Riley's chest ached. She hadn't expected him to speak, not like this, not so openly. The officers exchanged glances, their tidy narrative unraveling in real time. What they had expected to be a simple disciplinary proceeding now carried the weight of testimony from one of the Navy's most respected operators. And for the first time since that first ignored briefing, Riley felt the balance of power shift. Not victory, not yet, but the beginning of something she had never dared to believe in, being heard. That night, sitting alone on her bunk, Riley turned the rifle over in her hands. She traced the steel, the glass, the scratches that carried stories only she could tell. She thought of the men she had saved, the men she had killed, the chain of command she had. And she wondered, was this what her father had meant all along? That sometimes dignity doesn't come from permission. It comes from the quiet act of doing what no one else will. And living with it. What do you do when survival makes you a threat, not to the enemy, but to your own command? The hearing room smelled faintly of dust and coffee. Papers shuffled, pens clicked, officers cleared their throats with forced authority. Riley stood at attention, her uniform stiff, every crease perfect, though inside she felt anything but composed. She had told the truth, and truth in this place was dangerous. The senior officer repeated the words she had already confessed. You left the base without authorization. You engaged enemy combatants. You transmitted coordinates and provided overwatch without orders. His voice was steady, measured, like a man listing weather reports, all of which constitutes a violation of protocol. Hayes sat 2 seats down, hands folded, eyes sharp. He wasn't looking at her. He didn't need to. His smirk was faint, buried, but she felt it anyway. He wanted this, needed it, because her actions, if allowed to stand, were the very proof that his arrogance had nearly cost an entire SEAL team. But Martinez spoke before she could answer. His voice filled the room like gravel poured over steel, and all of which saved 12 lives, including mine. The room froze. No one interrupted a SEAL senior chief mid-sentence. Not in a place like this. Not when his words cut like a blade against the neat script Hayes was trying to write. The officer cleared his throat, uncomfortable. Senior Chief, your statement is noted, but this is not a question of. With respect, sir, Martinez said, leaning forward, his hands braced on the table. If you had been on the ground that night, you'd understand. We were pinned in. Sniper fire from 3 directions. We were minutes away from casualties we couldn't recover. Sergeant Blackwood acted when no one else did. You can call it unauthorized. I call it survival. The silence stretched long. Riley's heart thudded so loud she thought they could hear it. The officers shifted, glanced at one another, but said nothing. Hayes finally spoke, his voice sharp, cutting through the still air. This is exactly why analysts stay behind screens. They don't understand the scope of their choices. They react emotionally outside the chain of command and create chaos. Blackwood's recklessness could have endangered the mission. We were lucky. Next time we may not be. The words burned through her. Reckless. Emotional. The same words men like him had always used to silence her, to shrink her down until she fit into the box they needed her in. Riley forced her jaw tight, resisting the urge to answer. She knew the trap. One outburst and Hayes would win. The senior officer finally leaned back, folding his hands. This will require further review. Sergeant Blackwood, you will remain restricted to base until this inquiry is complete. Dismissed. She saluted, turned, and walked out, every step measured, steady. But inside, her chest felt like it was caving in. Outside the room, Martinez caught up to her. His hand brushed her shoulder, firm, grounding. Don't let him break you, he said quietly. She turned to look at him. His eyes weren't pitying. They were steady, unwavering, respectful. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice low. Defending me, you don't even know me. Martinez studied her for a long moment. I know what it feels like to be ignored when you're right. And I know what it feels like to watch good men die because someone higher up wanted to protect their pride. Her throat tightened. She looked away, unable to answer. Listen, he said, softer now. You did what needed to be done, that's rare. Don't let them turn it into a crime. And then he walked away, leaving her standing in the corridor, the weight of his words heavier than any order. The next days passed like walking a tightrope over silence. Riley reported to her station as if nothing had changed, eyes on screens, fingers tapping keys, but everyone in the room felt the shift. Analysts glanced at her when they thought she wasn't looking. Whispers followed her down hallways. Not ridicule, not quite respect either, something more complicated. She wasn't invisible anymore. And that terrified her. Because visibility meant vulnerability. Hayes wasn't done, she knew it. The man had too much to lose. His authority, his pride, his reputation. If her assessment was vindicated, if her actions were recognized, the questions wouldn't stop with her. They'd turn toward him, toward his dismissal of her warnings, toward the near disaster his arrogance had nearly caused. And men like Hayes didn't survive by admitting failure. They survived by burying those who exposed it. That night, Riley sat on her bunk, rifle case resting across her lap. She hadn't opened it, just held it there like a reminder of what she had done, a promise and a curse bound into steel and glass. She thought of the enemy snipers again, the ones whose faces she'd never see. Men who had trained like her, believed like her, probably told themselves they were fighting for something bigger than themselves. She had ended them in seconds, and the world was already moving on as if their lives had never existed. Her father's voice echoed again. The world will forget their names, Riley, but you won't. That's the weight of the trigger. She lowered her head into her hands, the case still pressing against her legs. Had she saved 12 lives? Yes. Had she taken others? Also yes. And between those truths, she felt herself being torn in two. The storm broke 3 days later. She was called back into the commander's office. Hayes was already there, his face unreadable, his hands clasped behind his back. The senior officer spoke first. Sergeant Blackwood, the review has concluded. Given the evidence, disciplinary action will be. However, your conduct remains outside the bounds of protocol. Effective immediately, you are reassigned to forward observer duties with Joint Special Operations. Your skills may be of use in the field where they can be supervised. Riley froze. Not punished, not discharged, reassigned. It was both a warning and a concession. They weren't absolving her. They weren't celebrating her. They were moving her somewhere she could be used and watched. She nodded once, voice steady. Understood, sir. Dismissed. Hayes's eyes followed her as she left, cold, calculating, not defeated, not yet. And Riley understood something then. This wasn't over. Martinez found her later, outside near the motor pool, the air heavy with dust and diesel. He leaned against a vehicle, arms crossed, studying her. Forward observer, he said, as if testing the words. That's closer to where you belong. She exhaled, staring at the ground. Or closer to where they can keep me in line. He tilted his head, a faint smile tugging his mouth. Maybe both. Doesn't change the fact that you're good at it, better than most. She looked up, meeting his eyes. For once she didn't argue, didn't deflect. She let the words sit there, strange and unfamiliar, like sunlight after too long in the dark. And in that moment, she realized something that unsettled her more than any sniper's scope ever had. She wanted this. Not the desk, not the silence, not the safe invisibility she had clung to for years. She wanted the field, the responsibility, the weight of choice, however unbearable. Because even when the guilt pressed like a stone on her chest, she knew the truth. She had never felt more alive than in the moment she pulled the trigger to save someone else. That night, lying awake again, she whispered into the dark, almost afraid to hear herself say it. This is who I am. and the silence that followed didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like an answer. How do you start over in a place that already doubts you? The forward operating base at Al was smaller, rougher, stripped of the polish Riley had grown used to at Joint Task Force headquarters. Here, dust clung to everything: rifles, boots, even the windshields of the vehicles parked crookedly in the motor pool. The air carried the constant drone of generators and the faint, sharp smell of burning trash from pits on the perimeter. This wasn't a place for analysts. It was a place for men who carried rifles, kicked indoors, and bled on the ground they fought for. And now it was hers. The assignment orders were blunt: forward observer, attached to special operations elements. Duties: terrain reconnaissance, overwatch coordination, live threat assessment. Translation: she would be sent forward closer to fire than she had ever been allowed before. Not as a peer, not as a trusted operator, but as a test case. A problem shuffled out of sight. The stares came the moment she walked into the tactical tent for her first briefing. Operators glanced up, their expressions unreadable but sharp. Some held curiosity, some irritation, one or two outright doubt. She caught murmured words as she passed. Intel, desk, sniper rumors. Rumors, that was all her story had become. She kept her face still, her back straight, her stride even. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing the weight she carried. The mission brief was led by a Marine major, clean-shaven, clipped tone, eyes on the map spread across the table. The operation was straightforward: raid on a compound believed to house foreign trainers working with local fighters. Intelligence suggested a weapons cache. When the major mentioned the potential for enemy overwatch positions, his tone was casual. Standard militia shooters, minimal range capabilities. Riley's chest tightened. She had heard that before. Her hand twitched toward her notes, but she didn't speak. Not yet, not here. The next evening, she sat crammed in the back of a Humvee, rifle case wedged between her knees, headset buzzing faintly with clipped radio chatter. The convoy rattled across dirt roads, headlights dimmed, the night air sharp with cold. She breathed slow, steady. Out here there was no desk to hide behind. If she failed, it wouldn't be in reports or briefings. It would be in blood. The convoy stopped 5 kilometers short of the target. From there, the team moved on foot, boots crunching softly against stone and scrub. Riley followed near the rear, scanning every shadow sharpened by the tension in her chest. When they reached the observation point, she dropped prone, setting up her rifle, scope sweeping the terrain ahead. The compound sat dark against the valley floor, its walls jagged, faint lantern light glowing in a courtyard. And then movement. Not near the compound, higher on the ridge east. She saw it as clear as moonlight, a figure lying prone, a glint of glass. Her throat tightened. Possible overwatch East Ridge, she whispered into her mic, keeping her voice calm, professional. Coordinates incoming. The team leader's voice came back skeptical. Confirm, looks clear from here. She steadied her breathing, adjusting the scope. Confirmed, one sniper, likely foreign trained. Range 800 meters, he's tracking us. A pause, then a low mutter over comms. Doubt, suspicion. But before anyone could dismiss her, the enemy fired. A round snapped overhead, smacking stone with a sharp crack. The operators dove for cover, cursing, returning fire blindly toward the ridge. Riley didn't move. She stayed prone, calm, scope locked. She exhaled, squeezed, fired. The figure slumped. The ridge went quiet. Her headset crackled with stunned silence. Then the team leader's voice. Overwatch neutralized, move out. He didn't thank her, he didn't need to. The silence said enough. Back at the fob, the stares had changed. Not friendly, not welcoming, but no longer dismissive either. One Marine passed her in the chow tent, his eyes flicking to the rifle case at her side. Hell of a shot, he muttered, almost grudgingly. It wasn't praise, but it wasn't dismissal either. She nodded once, silent, and inside something shifted. But still at night the guilt came. She lay awake in her bunk, staring at the canvas roof, hearing again the sharp crack of her rifle. The image of the man on the ridge wouldn't leave her. She had killed another soldier who had never known her name. Her father's voice echoed again. Responsibility doesn't get lighter. You just learn how to carry it without breaking. But she wondered, was she carrying it or was it carrying her? The line between duty and obsession was blurring. She could feel it. The more she proved herself, the more she needed to prove again. Not for them, for herself. To silence the voice that told her she didn't belong. And that voice never really went quiet. Weeks passed. Missions blurred together. Riley became the silent constant at the edge of the teams, watching, waiting, seeing threats before others could. She wasn't embraced, but she was trusted in moments that mattered. That was enough. One night, after another tense raid, Martinez found her outside the fob, cleaning her rifle under the pale wash of moonlight. He had been rotated in with his SEALs to coordinate joint operations. "You're making waves," he said, crouching beside her. She didn't look up, not sure if that's a good thing. "Waves mean you're not invisible anymore," he said. "That's something." She ran a cloth down the barrel, her hands steady. "Or it means I'm painting a target on my back." Martinez studied her. "You're not wrong, but targets can be armor too. People know you now. They'll think twice before writing you off again." She finally looked at him, except Hayes. His jaw tightened. He didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "Hayes will make his move. Men like him always do. The question is, will you be ready when he does?" She didn't answer because she didn't know. But the chance to find out came sooner than she expected. Another mission, another valley, another target compound. But this time the resistance wasn't scattered. It was organized, coordinated. The kind of fight Riley had predicted before and been ignored for. And once again she saw it first. Through her scope, she caught the telltale shift of light, not one, not two, but 4 sniper nests encircling the valley. Her voice came urgent over comms. "We're walking into a kill box. 4 overwatch positions. Coordinates incoming." Silence. Then the Major's voice flat. "Blackwood, you're seeing shadows." Her chest burned. Shadows, the same word Hayes had used. She ground her teeth. "No, sir, I'm not. If you push forward, you'll be pinned from all sides." But command silence stretched. Orders still drove the team forward. Her throat closed. She thought of Martinez's words. "Will you be ready when he makes his move?" She tightened her grip on the rifle. The operators below were advancing, exposed, walking straight into the lines she could already see in her scope. And once again, the choice fell on her. Follow orders or act. Her finger hovered on the trigger. And the silence in her headset felt heavier than the night itself. How many times can you break the same rule before it breaks you? Riley lay prone at her scope cutting through darkness that command refused to see. 4 sniper nests. 4 overlapping fields of fire. She could trace the kill box in her mind, the geometry of death drawn neat and precise against the valley floor. Below, the operators advanced, trusting orders, blind. Her headset crackled with the Major's clipped voice. "Continue advance. Minimal resistance expected." Minimal, her jaw tightened. She wanted to scream into the mic to shake them awake, but orders didn't bend for voices like hers. They bent only for blood. And she wasn't willing to wait for that. Her father's voice whispered again, steady and merciless. "Hesitation kills. Sometimes not you. Sometimes the ones you could have saved." She exhaled, crosshairs settled. The first nest lit faintly as its shooter adjusted position. She fired. The figure jerked, slumped. Her headset erupted instantly. Shouts, confusion, the Major's voice sharp, furious. Who fired? Who authorized that? She ignored him, shifted, chambered, found the second glint of glass, fired again. Another silhouette dropped. The valley exploded. Enemy rifles cracked back, muzzle flashes strobing across the ridge. Two nests still alive, their fire ripping down into the advancing team. Operators scattered, cursing, diving for cover. Riley's voice cut across the chaos, firm, measured. Two nests down. Remaining positions at grid 214 and 217. Suppress and move. Martinez's voice answered before the major could. Copy, moving now. Gunfire roared below as the operators adjusted, returning fire with precision. Smoke grenades hissed, clouding the valley. Riley cycled her bolt again, found the third nest through haze. She fired. Silence. The last sniper remained, the most dangerous. He hadn't fired yet, waiting, patient, disciplined. She swept the scope, scanning, searching, heartbeat hammering. Where was he? Then she saw it. The faintest shadow tucked beneath a rock shelf, barrel angled low. He wasn't targeting the operators. He was targeting her. The realization hit a split second before the shot cracked. The round punched stone inches from her head, shards slicing her cheek. She rolled, dust choking her throat, chambering again. Through the blur she found the flash. Exhaled. Fired. The ridge went silent. Her headset filled with the sound of men breathing hard, moving fast, alive. Martinez's voice came rough but steady. All nests neutralized. Blackwood, we're clear. You just saved us again. Her chest heaved. Her cheeks stung with blood. Her hands shook against the rifle. But inside she felt it again, that dangerous, undeniable truth. This was who she was. Back at the FOB, the fallout hit instantly. The major's report was scathing. Unauthorized engagement, reckless independence, compromised chain of command. He demanded disciplinary action, immediate removal. But the operators' testimonies told a different story. Every man had felt the net closing around them. Every man had heard Riley's calm, precise directions cutting through the chaos. And every man knew, without her, they wouldn't have walked out. The contradiction split the room. Commanders debated, officers deflected. Hayes watched from the edge, silent, calculating. Riley sat in the center of it, hands folded, face calm. She didn't argue, didn't defend. The truth was already written into the eyes of the men who had survived because of her. But truth and survival didn't always weigh more than politics. Hayes finally spoke, his voice quiet, smooth. Patterns are forming. Sergeant Blackwood repeatedly disregards orders, repeatedly places herself in combat roles outside her scope. This is insubordination disguised as initiative. If we reward it, we erode the chain of command entirely. The words were sharp, polished, designed to stick. The room went still. Riley felt every eye on her. And for a moment she wondered if Hayes was right. Was she insubordinate, a rogue element, a danger to the very structure she swore to uphold? But then she thought of the ridge, the silence after each shot, the faces of men alive because she had refused to wait for permission. She lifted her chin, said nothing, because sometimes silence was sharper than defense. That night Martinez found her again. He leaned against the doorframe of her quarters, arms folded, eyes tired but steady. "They're coming for you," he said simply. She looked up from the rifle she was cleaning, her hands moving in slow, methodical rhythm. "I know." "You're not wrong," he said. "You've never been wrong, but Hayes will bury you to protect himself. And you can't fight him the way you fought those snipers, not with a rifle, not head-on." She paused, the cloth still in her hand. "Then how?" Martinez studied her for a long moment. "By surviving long enough to prove that you're not an accident, that what you did wasn't luck, that it wasn't recklessness, it was skill, intent, discipline. They can't erase what's undeniable." She set the rifle down, met his eyes. "And if they try anyway?" His jaw tightened. "Then they'll have to come through me." Her chest ached at the weight of those words. She wanted to thank him, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she nodded once. the silence carrying everything she couldn't say. Days later, another mission. Another valley, another target. This time, Riley wasn't in the rear. She was embedded with the operators, moving low and fast through scrub, her rifle slung across her chest. The men kept their distance at first, quiet, unreadable. But when fire erupted from it was her voice that cut through the noise, calm and precise. 2 shooters, 70 degrees, range 650. The operators adjusted instantly. Suppression fire roared. And when Riley's shot dropped the lead threat, no one questioned it. No one hesitated. They trusted her now. Not all the way, not fully, but enough. And that was everything. Back at the FOB, Hayes made his move. Riley was called into another closed meeting. Hayes sat at the head of the table this time, papers spread before him. His voice was cool, detached. Staff Sergeant Blackwood, your record now reflects 2 unauthorized engagements, 2 breaches of protocol. This pattern is unacceptable. Recommendations are being considered for reassignment, potentially to non-operational duties. Her chest tightened. Non-operational desk, silence again. She didn't speak, didn't break. Hayes leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Do you understand why you're here, Sergeant? Because this isn't about what you did. It's about what it represents. If we let analysts decide when to fire, when to act, when to break protocol, then we don't have a chain of command. We have chaos. And chaos kills more men than bullets. His words hung heavy. Dangerous because they weren't entirely wrong. But Riley met his gaze, steady, unflinching. And arrogance kills faster. The room froze. Hayes's eyes flared just for a second. Then he leaned back, cold smile cutting across his face. This isn't over, he said quietly. And Riley knew then he wasn't just her superior anymore. He was her enemy. That night, lying awake, she whispered into the dark again. Not a question, not a confession. Just truth. They'll never understand, but I know who I am. And the silence that answered was no longer heavy. It was resolve. What happens when the line between orders and survival disappears completely? The mission briefing was short, almost rushed. A suspected weapons convoy moving through a mountain pass. Intercept, secure, extract. Hayes himself had authorized the plan. His presence in the briefing tent carried weight, not support, not confidence, but surveillance. He was watching her, waiting for the mistake he could finally use to end her. Riley sat at the edge of the table, silent, eyes scanning the maps. The convoy route was narrow, boxed in by on both sides. High ground everywhere, perfect for ambush. When the major finished speaking, Riley cleared her throat. Sir, this pass has at least 6 elevated vantage points. Too many blind angles for a clean intercept, if they've got overwatch. Hayes cut her off with a flat hand. We've accounted for that. Militia fighters lack the training for coordinated sniper coverage. Your concerns are noted. The same words, always the same words. Her jaw tightened. She swallowed her reply, because she knew it didn't matter what she said in this tent. The only thing that would matter would be the choices she made once boots hit dirt. Hours later, the convoy crept through the pass. 3 Humvees, 1 armored MRAP, headlights dimmed to slivers of white against the dark canyon walls. The air was heavy, still, as if even the wind was holding its breath. Riley sat in the second vehicle, rifle across her lap, headset buzzing with static and clipped comms. She felt the tension crackling off the operators around her. No one trusted Hayes's certainty. Not really, but orders were orders. The first sign came subtle, too subtle for anyone but her. A flicker of light high on the ridge, not a star, a reflection. Her throat closed. She leaned forward, keyed the mic. Overwatch at 10 o'clock, range 700, possible second at 2 o'clock, they're here. The convoy jolted as the lead Humvee erupted in sparks. A round had punched through its engine block, then another, and another. Gunfire cracked from both ridges at once. The canyon lit with muzzle flashes. The ambush had begun. Chaos tore through the comms. Operators dove from vehicles, returning fire, scrambling for cover among the rocks. The MRAP roared forward, turret hammering against the cliffs, but its rounds chewed empty stone. The shooters were too well dug in. Riley rolled from the Humvee, hitting the dirt, rifle up. Her scope swept the ridge. She saw them, not militia, not amateurs, professional, coordinated. 6 snipers, just as she'd feared, covering every angle of the pass. Her chest tightened. This wasn't an ambush, it was an execution. She keyed the mic, her voice sharp. 6 nests, repeat 6, coordinates transmitting, we need suppressive fire now. The major's voice came back, panicked. Fall back to vehicles. Fall back, with engines already shredded and ridges alive with fire. It was suicide. Her father's words echoed again, as clear as if he were lying beside her in the dust. When the people giving orders don't see the battlefield, you make the choice they can't. She chambered her rifle, exhaled, and fired. 1 nest fell silent. The comms erupted. Operators shouted her name now, not with dismissal but with urgency. Blackwood's 2nd nest, bearing 215. She shifted, fired again. The ridge spat dust where another sniper had been. But fire rained down heavier. 1 operator screamed over comms, hit. Another called for a medic. The canyon floor was chaos, stone exploding, rounds ricocheting like wasps. Riley's chest burned. She couldn't kill them fast enough. 6 nests, too many. And then Martinez's voice cut through, calm, steady. Blackwood, I've got eyes on the North Ridge, direct me. She froze for a heartbeat. He was here. Copy, she said, snapping back. North Ridge, grid 321, suppress. His fire cracked seconds later, precise, professional. A nest went dark. The balance shifted, not enough but just enough. Together they began to carve openings. Riley dropped another nest. Martinez cut a 4th. The operators surged forward, finding cover, regrouping under their cover fire. Still the air stank of cordite and blood. 2 operators were down, 1 unmoving. The medic crawled through dust, dragging him to cover, rounds snapping overhead. Riley clenched her jaw, forcing her breath steady. She lined her scope on the 5th nest, heart hammering. She exhaled, fired, silence. Only 1 left. But this one was clever. Hidden deep, muzzle barely visible, range extreme. He fired once and the medic screamed, dropping into the dirt beside the wounded operator. Riley's chest twisted. She adjusted, dialed, found the angle. Her cheeks stung against the stock, her hands trembling now. She exhaled, felt her father's voice steady her. Breath, trigger, break. Her shot cracked the canyon. The last nest went still. Silence fell, not peace, not safety, just silence, heavy, exhausted, broken. Her headset carried only the sound of men breathing hard, voices low, urgent but alive. Martinez's voice came last, steady. Blackwood, you just saved the convoy. She closed her eyes, the rifle still pressed to her cheek. Her chest heaved, her hands shook. But inside she knew the truth. Not all of them had been saved, not this time. And that truth cut deeper than any bullet. Back at base, the report was chaos. 2 men dead, 3 wounded, vehicles destroyed, enemy force larger and more organized than intelligence suggested. The major deflected blame upward. The ambush was unexpected, impossible to predict. Hayes sat silent, letting the words hang. But everyone in the room knew. Riley had predicted, Riley had warned, Riley had acted. And once again, it was her defiance that had kept the mission from becoming a massacre. But this time the cost was visible. Men wrapped in bandages, empty bunks, silence in the mess tent where laughter should have been. And Hayes seized it. She escalates, he said in the after-action review. Every mission, every time she disregards the chain of command, the fight grows bloodier. This isn't discipline, it's obsession. and obsession gets men killed. His words were sharp, cutting, delivered with the authority of rank. And for the first time, Riley saw them land. She saw doubt flicker in the eyes around the table. Martinez spoke, his voice like gravel. She didn't get them killed, she kept the rest alive. But the silence that followed was heavier than his defense. Because Hayes was right about one thing. The cost was growing, and Riley felt it pressing down on her chest like a weight she couldn't shake. That night, alone in her quarters, she couldn't clean her rifle, couldn't even touch it. She sat on the bunk staring at her hands. They shook faintly even at rest. She thought of the men she hadn't saved, the medic's scream, the silence after the last shot. And for the first time, she whispered not to the dark, not to her father's memory, but to herself. Am I saving them, or am I just trying to save myself? The silence that followed felt heavier than any battlefield. What does it cost to stand when the weight of the world tells you to kneel? Riley sat alone in the operations tent, the hum of radios filling the silence like a restless heartbeat. Reports scrolled across the screens in front of her. Casualty lists, mission outcomes, numbers that reduced men's lives into data points. 2 dead from the convoy ambush, 3 wounded. She could still see their faces, still hear their voices, sharp with laughter only days before. Gone now. And Hayes's words rang in her ears, sharp as the crack of rifle fire. Obsession gets men killed. The truth, she couldn't argue it, not anymore. Because obsession had taken root inside her. Obsession with being heard, with proving herself, with being more than the quiet analyst behind a desk. And in chasing that, had she crossed a line she could never return from. Her father's voice echoed again, steady but unyielding. Dignity isn't about who salutes you, Riley. It's about whether you can look yourself in the mirror when the silence comes. She closed her eyes, could she? She didn't know. The next mission came faster than she expected. High-value target. Intelligence pointed to a villa in the outskirts of Aleppo, fortified, crawling with fighters. Hayes himself pushed the operation forward. He insisted on leading the planning, insisted on being present for the insertion. Martinez found her the night before, leaning against the hood of a Humvee under the pale wash of moonlight. His face was tired, drawn. "He's setting you up," Martinez said flatly. She didn't ask how he knew. She didn't need to. "He'll make sure you're isolated," he went on. "He'll wait for you to act. Then he'll call it recklessness. He'll bury you under the bodies of men he refused to listen to." Riley looked at him, throat tight. "So what do I do? Sit back, watch it happen?" Martinez's jaw worked. He didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. She couldn't sit back, she never could. The villa rose out of the dark like a shadowed fortress, walls jagged, windows glowing faint with lantern light. The operators moved in silence, fanning across the perimeter. Hayes was there, crisp even in combat gear, headset buzzing with his commands. "Stick to plan," he ordered. "No deviations, no side engagements. Blackwood, you are overwatch only. No engagement without my direct authorization." The words were a chain around her throat. She sat up on the ridge, rifle steady, scope sweeping the compound. Her pulse hammered. Every shadow could hold a rifle, every window a barrel. And then she saw it. Movement subtle, calculated. Snipers again. 2, no, 3 positions already set, rifles angled at the kill zone the team was walking into. Her chest constricted. She keyed the mic. "Overwatch confirms 3 sniper nests. Coordinates transmitting. Advise immediate adjustment of approach." Hayes's voice came back sharp. "Negative. Hold position. No engagement until confirmed hostile fire." Hostile fire, wait for blood. Her finger hovered on the trigger. Her breath trembled. And in that moment the loop closed. Every ignored warning, every silenced voice, every choice she had made because others wouldn't. Her father's voice steadied her as it always had. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it acts. She exhaled, fired. The first nest went silent. Blackwood, Hayes's roar exploded in her headset. Cease fire, that's a direct order. She ignored him, shifted, fired again. A second nest dropped. Chaos tore through the comms. Operators shouting, Hayes screaming, Martinez cutting in with calm directions. The team surged forward, alive, adjusting, moving under the cover she had created. She chambered again, sweat stinging her eyes, heart pounding. The third sniper shifted, lining a shot on the advancing SEALs. She steadied, breath breaking, and fired. Silence. The kill zone collapsed. The operators pressed in, breaching the villa under cover of her fire. It was over in minutes, target secured, team alive. And in the ringing quiet that followed, Riley knew she had just signed the end of her career. The debrief was brutal. Hayes's fury shook the walls. He accused her of insubordination, recklessness, disobedience. He demanded her removal, her court-martial, her career burned to ash. Riley stood silent. She didn't argue, didn't plead, because the truth was plain. She had broken orders again and again and again. But then Martinez spoke. "Sir, with respect," he said, his voice low but carrying, "if she hadn't fired, you'd be burying half this team tonight. You told us to wait for hostile fire. That fire would have been on us." Silence. Every man in the room knew it was true, even Hayes, especially Hayes. But truth didn't matter to him, not when pride was at stake. The inquiry dragged for weeks. Questions, reports, accusations. Riley answered each with calm, steady honesty. Yes, she had acted. Yes, she had broken orders. Yes, she would do it again. Because lives were more important than pride. And slowly, quietly, the tide shifted. Martinez's team filed statements. Other operators submitted letters. Even junior analysts whispered their support. Not loudly, not publicly, but enough. And in the end, Hayes was the one reassigned, quietly, without ceremony. His arrogance had become too obvious, his failures too costly. He disappeared into the paperwork of the chain of command, his name little more than a bitter footnote. Riley remained. Not celebrated, not decorated, but present, assigned fully as forward observer, no longer hidden, no longer ignored. She had carved her place, not by permission but by necessity. Weeks later, she sat again on a ridge, rifle steady, scope sweeping another valley. Another mission, another silence before the storm. Her hands were steady now, not because the guilt was gone, it never would be, but because she had learned to carry it. Martinez's voice came soft over comms, eyes on Blackwood. She smiled faintly, unseen, always. And in that moment she understood. Strength wasn't about shouting the loudest in a briefing room. It wasn't about rank or insignia or permission. It was about choosing to act when no one else would. It was about carrying the silence, living with it. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.